Simon, this time last week, we were in the throes of trying to establish whether or not the fight between Conor Benn and Chris Eubank Jr. was still going to go ahead following Benn's failed drugs test. We know what happened. The fight was postponed. Now, going into this, the fight wasn't without controversy. Lots of discussions around what was a fight between two boxers from two different weight categories. Conor Benn had to go up in weight, while Chris Eubank Jr. had to come down. Now, it's considered by many in boxing that in doing that, the process carries risk. And our very own Spencer Oliver and Adam Catterall testified to that. But it's important to note, going into it, both fighters agreed to the 157 catch weight. Chris Eubank Sr. was a vocal opponent of his son even taking the fight on. A short time ago, he gave me his views of the fight being called off and the manner of the postponement.
Well, I suppose I have to respond as follows. Anyone who attempts to murder my son, I have my view of them, of which I'm going to share with the world.
I mean, that's very strong, Chris. Anyone who attempts to murder my son.
Hold on a minute. What do you mean strong? That's not strong. That's very polite for anyone who would attempt to murder my boy. So why is it strong? Because you know. No, sorry. Oh, of course, you don't know. That if you're 33 years old, you can't do what you used to do in your mid-20s, which is to lose weight and be able to handle the loss of that weight. To take a man down 3 pounds beneath the middleweight limit, which is 160 pounds, to have him boil down to 157 is literally attempted murder. And they wanted me to be an accomplice to it. They were asking me to take money to come onto the zone and be a part of it. They asked me to be in my son's corner. They were trying to pay me to be in my son's corner. They wanted me to be an accomplice to my son's murder. Now, if you think that's strong, you need to talk to Michael Watson. You need to talk to Gerald McClellan, if he can make sense. You need to speak to Nick Blackwell. You need to speak to Mike Tyson. You need to speak to Lennox Lewis. Then you'll understand the magnitude of this outrage.
But Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, your son agreed to do that weight change, did he not?
Yes, he wouldn't listen to me. He wouldn't listen to me. And so I had to go behind the scenes in silence and help them make the right decision. And the right decision was made the day before the fight was to take place.
So you were relieved that the fight did not take place?
Relieved is an insult. You have no idea what it means to lose a son. It's an insult to say to me, oh, you were relieved. Relieved? Relieved? Look, he's my son. I've loved him all his life, 33 years. I've done everything I can do to actually bolster him into a position of strength to where no one would cheat him and misuse him. See, if someone tried to murder your son, you would sound like me. And if you wouldn't sound like me, then you aren't a man. And I'm here to tell everybody that we're men. We're not boys, we're not idiots, we're not fools, we're not toddlers, we're men. And we have to protect our sons. The world is going to know, because I'm going to actually shine a little bit of light on them.
Chris Eubank Sr., I understand, Simon, is a live theatre show at the Coventry Building Society Arena on Friday night, and you have to wonder if he'll reveal even more come that time. We've reached out to both fight promoters, but have had no response as yet. Simon, Eubank Sr.'s rage comes down to the weight issue here. Recount for us, would you, why this seems to be the crux of the matter?
Because you're taking a fighter like Chris Eubank Jr., not like Chris Eubank Jr., Chris Eubank Jr., down to a weight level that he hasn't been at since he's 18 years of age. and you're taking it to a point where it becomes physically impactive for him to be able to achieve that. The boiling down of him physically to get to a level of 157 pounds is a very difficult task, will weaken and disadvantage him. Of course, he's walking around saying that he only needs to be at 60%, so there's a slight contradiction in there from the fighter himself. And then there is a rehydration limit so that he cannot naturally build back some of the water and some of the things that he's taken out of his body to get to the weight level to be able to meet a catch weight freak show of a fight that, in my view, despite the intrigue and the cynical leveraging of legacy names, was always a fight that had real I had issues with for both fighters. For Conor Benn, perhaps being on the receiving of a beating because he was going up 2 classes, and for the jeopardy of Chris Eubank. Now, Junior, Senior is coming from a position in that soliloquy of deep emotional investment in his son because of the experience he's had recently with the tragedy of losing his other son. So you can hear that. It pervades his conversation. When you get into language of murder, you've got a 33-year-old man who is prepared, this is his son, prepared as a grown man. When I was 33 years of age, I owned a Premier League football club, I had 2,000 people working for me, and I didn't need my dad to tell me what contracts I can and can't sign. I had the choices of my own mindset. Chris Eubank himself, Senior, went up weight classes and went and fought at cruiserweight from being a middleweight himself. So weight classes are things that fighters can bounce around in. Whether it's advisable or not is a different discussion. He is clearly uncomfortable with the nature of this show. He's clearly uncomfortable with the decisions that his son has made. But, you know, I have great reservations about the conduct of the supposed authorities in this debacle, whether that's the promoters, whether it's the British Boxing Board of Control. But I am also...
Why? Because you think it was flawed from the start?
Well, I think it's flawed from the start. I think the entire situation surrounding the fallout is reprehensible. It's reprehensible. People colluded to find a way around a failed drugs test. I know Conor Benn is on a pedestal now, or on a plinth, shouting from his social media that he's going to make people eat their words. And I pray and hope he does, because I really like the boy. But where we are at this moment in time, prior to him clearing his name, those that needed to know, that had the authority to change the direction of travel on this situation, decided not to, for reasons best known to themselves. And that they talk about adverse findings. We know that this was a scenario that has been created, that's created uproar in the boxing world. And this is going to rumble on. Now, there was an attempt to marginalise Chris Eubank in the press. There were questions about Senior's mental state, and I wonder about the cynical nature of how people start to discredit people when they've clearly got an issue with that person not wanting this fight in the first place. But he must focus his energies on his own son, unless he's saying his son isn't of sound body and mind, because Chris Eubank Jr. took this fight for no other reason than money. There's no career advancement in this. It's a cynical leveraging of legacy names of the two fathers. And, you know, you can also look at this if you want to be very cynical about things. There was some real criticism from Nick Blackwell against the Eubanks about their lack of empathy towards his situation when he was in a coma as a result of the fight that he had with Chris Eubank Jr. Look, Senior has earned the right to have his opinion, and I'm no doubt we're going to hear it. And I really do believe that those that had the influence, and that includes the Boxing Board of Control, need to be held to account. But what do you do in a game where apparently the sanctioning body don't seem to be able to control things, and only when a newspaper breaks it? The leading promoters don't seem to be able to control things. Who do you turn to regulate this Wild West?
Where do you think the leak to the Daily Mail of the failed drugs test came from?
I've got an idea who it's come from. I'm not going to tell you on air because it compromises the people that have told me, but I think people will be surprised when they find out who it may have come from. I don't think it will have come from Chris Eubank Sr, because if they'd have made Chris Eubank Sr aware of this as early as the drug test result came back, which was the 23rd of September, we wouldn't have been hearing about it on the 5th of October. We'd have been hearing about it on the same day, because he'd have been out like a town crier, letting everybody know, on top of his already well-established views about his uncomfortable, you know, the discomfort he had with this fight. I listened to that, and I listened to a man. When he's talking to you, this wasn't the Chris Eubank Sr. that manipulates words and talks in a certain way that people parody. This was a man that was so irate that he could barely control the expressions that he was using.
It was unbelievable being the receiving end.
I could feel it pervading the conversation, which is, don't insult me about how I feel about this. And it
because
was
he's lost
sheer,
his son.
Well, absolutely. Sheer unbridled rage. And he's obviously looking around. And there's some real long-term relationships there in there. This is a guy that has a relationship with one of the promoter's fathers that goes back 30 years. You know, you would have thought that these guys trusted one another to the point where they could trust one another's children with one another.
You wonder what else is to come out. I would suggest plenty.
Well, I think there needs to be. I think people can run off to Australia and people can duck for cover and people can go into press conferences and not answer questions and people can do interviews that don't result in anybody saying anything meaningful and stage interviews that are people that are favourable to you. But you now have more than a storm in a teacup. You have boxing right in the focus of people's attention, both in the media and in the public domain, for all the wrong reasons.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.